said, I mean, the whole point of manipulation is that it's hard to point out. Right? Because if it was easy to point out and actually know for certainty that manipulation was happening, then nobody would use our change and, or the principal would go to jail or whatever. So there's no hard proof, but it's very, it's very well known that there's a lot of spoofing and watch trading and all sorts of stuff that goes on in crypto exchanges. Much of it is facilitated by Tether, but if there was some other reserve currency that wasn't Tether, that would be the one we'd say everyone's watch trading, right? So I don't know that it has that much to do with Tether, so much as it's simply the fact that this is the dominant reserve currency for trading. Right? Yeah, in the back.
Where exactly Tether hosts money right now? What is jurisdiction? What kind of bank does it use? Is it true that it hides?
Does Tether use?
Yes.
So they were previously with Noble Bank, which is in Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. There's been claims that they moved to HSBC?
I think that was the rumor.
Okay, yeah, whatever. There are rumors. Nobody knows. I don't know.
What's the reason behind nobody knows? And why it's not the case for TrueUSD, let's say?
I'm sorry, can you say that a lot?
What's the reason behind the hiding the fact what bank do we use as a host bank?
Why the bank do we use it? Well, okay.
And why other stablecoins do not hide like a circle or like TrueUSD?
I mean, so ultimately, the reality is for Tether. I mean, again, I don't want to speculate too much about like why Tether is doing what they're doing. Like very clearly in the past, Tether, was founded like basically after the Bitfinex hack in 2016, I want to say 2017, whatever. And it's very likely that basically Tether has kind of a shady background. They cleaned up their act significantly, but regulators are not super happy with Tether. It's very clear that there have been a lot of investigations into Tether that have been thwarted by Tether secrecy around who their banking partners are, and Tether's constantly had to move from bank to bank in order to maintain banking relationships because naturally, nobody wants to bank you if they think the U.S. government is out. So Tether's kind of a shit show in a lot of different ways. I'm not an expert on Tether, so I'm not gonna claim to know where they are right now, what they're thinking, but it's quite likely that 2 years from now we won't be using Tether anymore. So that's all I'll say in that regard. Yeah.
You also mentioned DGX, which is backed by gold. How the redemption happens? So how?
That I don't know. I don't know the mechanics for DGX. I don't want to speculate, but I would assume it's kind of analogous to what happens with Tether. Yes.
So where do you think the regulatory issue happens? Is it only when you unlock an off-ramp for fiat that will create that problem?
Yeah, so if you look at the newer regulated stablecoins, like Gemini Dollar, right? So Gemini Dollar, it says that yes, we only do KML on the on-ramps and off-ramps. However, we also monitor the blockchain. And if we see that anyone's up to no good, we reserve the right to be able to disable their accounts and basically freeze their assets and conduct investigations of that. Okay? This is the kind of thing you have to do if you want to be a financial intermediary in the United States. Tether's not doing that. Tether's not, they're like,
for example, do you think DGX can avoid that problem because it's not being clear?
That's correct. That's correct. DGX has a different regulatory framework because it's collateralized with gold as opposed to with fiat currencies. Again, I'm not an expert on this, but that is my understanding. Cool. Okay, we got another one in the back.
Yeah, isn't the reason why like fiat-based, let's say Bitcoin currency right now has a bigger market cap than decentralized MakerDAO?
I'm sorry, what is the reason?
The reason behind the fiat-based stablecoins like a Tether, TrueUSD, Gemini, GUSD, even DGX has a bigger market cap than, let's say, MakerDAO.
The question is why?
Yes.
Yes, we will get to that when we discuss exactly the crypto collateralized stablecoins. So I'll hold off on that question. Yes.
This is a little bit of a complex question. Every bank in the U.S. is regulated by the OCC, and that gives consumers some level of surety that those transactions are actually going to happen, and there is a fact that if the institution doesn't perform, the OCC will step in and perform based upon all those things.
Yeah.
If you monetize money and exchange of value, two items. One is there's no one that I'm going to trust that monetarily and power-wise, which means an army and so forth to step in and say, you will do this transaction or
Yeah.
we're gonna shut you down,
Right.
right? The thing is law.
That's right.
And will the government ever give up control of currency? Because it is a power, right?
That's true.
And if I can't control my currency, or I let that currency be replaced or pegged to something else,
Yeah.
then that power goes away, right?
That's true.
And the government then says, do I exist or don't I exist? I mean, that's a big, major piece of it. So overall, as much as we would like to have cryptocurrency and so forth, at some point when it becomes something that's a pain in the neck for the government, we're just gonna come in and say, we can't do this. And by the way, we'll just issue digital dollars, which we literally, right? The Fed approves its own budget and just says, okay, I'm gonna wire in money. You know, they're not moving gold or dollar bills or whatever, right?
Right.
I mean, they set their own budget each year, and the Fed basically funds, moves a couple of electrons over and says, I got an extra $1 billion to run this year, whatever the budget is each year.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right in the fundamental point that fiat collateralized coins are basically isomorphic to the U.S. dollar, like a digital U.S. dollar, right? So if you think about it, if the U.S. inflates the supply of U.S. dollars and the U.S. value of the U.S. dollar goes down, that will be reflected in every fiat collateralized stablecoin, right? Like it serves the exact same purpose, and for most of the more regulated stablecoins, they even have the same fundamental model where if a U.S. regulator shows up on Gemini's first account and says, hey, this person is a terrorist, shut down their account, they'll do it like that, right? So right now, I think for the fiat collateralized stablecoins that are going to be overtaking Tether most likely in the not too far future, that they are essentially a continuation of the normal economic model of a regulated bank, right? That's one of the criticisms of fiat collateralized stablecoins, and I think it's a fair one, and it's one that to keep in mind as when considering how well can this kind of stablecoin sustain the kind of future we want within crypto. Now, your point about will governments allow this to happen, I think it's a much larger and wider question than I can probably answer today. So I'll take that as a comment, and I think we can maybe address that in our sort of fireside chat thing.
Yeah, and also about crypto collateral.
Yeah, and the kind of crypto collateral. So let me go ahead and just wrap this up here. So let's just analyze what do we think of the scheme of fiat collateralized stablecoins, right? It's really fucking simple. And that's a virtue. That is a tremendous virtue, especially in the world of crypto, where everything's complicated and things break and get hacked all the time. Okay? A fiat collateralized stablecoin is awesome because it's just really simple to understand, and it's really simple to understand how and when it breaks. And even if it gets hacked, guess what? People aren't hacking your bank, right? They're hacking the blockchain. So you can't get hacked and all the money gets thrown out. You get hacked and the blockchain has some weird stuff on it, and then Tether actually got hacked for $30 million sometime last year. And what did they do? Well, they just said, well, that $30 million doesn't count anymore, right? Done. Hack solved, right? That's pretty good. It's inelegant, but it works. So now, of course, the downside is that it's completely centralized, right? It is dependent on the solvency and honesty of one party, and of course, for the government to not go after that party and decide they don't like that party anymore. So it also means that most of the time, or at least much of the time, you don't have a lot of transparency, unless the issuer is somebody who's by default going to be very transparent. But if they're being under the thumb of regulators, then they're only going to be as transparent as the regulators allow them to be. This can lead to a lot of market scares, such as what happened recently with Tether. If you guys were following prices in the last week, where Tether, for the first time in a very, very long time, unpegged from $1 and was trading at the bottom about 93 cents. Just because of fears that Tether might have been insolvent, or they might have lost a banking relationship, or that something might have gone terribly wrong with Tether. And this was principally because, look, Tether couldn't tell people what was going on. People had basically no communication because Tether was kind of on the run right. So now the nice thing about this, though, I mean, one of the benefits to fiat collateral is that it's 100% price stable, no matter what happens in crypto land. Okay, Ethereum can crash, MakerDAO can explode, all this stuff can go wrong, and Tether is ready to go. Right? That's pretty cool. That's groovy. That said, that's true for crypto land, not true for real world land. Right? In real world land, if bad stuff happens to Tether or the issuer, then okay, maybe this is price signal at all. And of course, then the downside of this, there's a high regulatory burden and the risk of government shutdown. It means that the issuer needs to expend a lot of energy and money in maintaining compliance. That's kind of a pain in the ass, and it makes it expensive to run. And ultimately, Tether needs to pay their bills, and so does FreeBSD and all these other collateralized deals. Now the nice thing about it, it's fairly collateral efficient. It's okay. It's basically 1-to-1. So $1 collateral means $1 stablecoin. Right? This one might be like kind of like, well, what do you mean? Why is that interesting? So different schemes have different collateral intensiveness. Basically meaning, let's say that there's a lot of trading that wants to happen here. And there's $2 billion of demand organically for people who want to trade crypto. And so if people had enough stablecoins, they would trade using those stablecoins. But some schemes require way more collateral or way less collateral in order to satisfy that demand of the $2 billion that wants to get traded. So for Tether, how much collateral do you need to lock up in order to have $2 billion of trading value? Well, you need exactly $2 billion, right? That's reasonable. It's not bad. So Yvonne will now take over and discuss the latter two forms of collateralization. Whoops.
All right, cool. So we discussed the fiat collateralized stablecoins, and they have a bunch of nice properties in that it's clear that there's enough money in the bank to support the price, and it's clear that the peg breaking is independent of anything that happens in the crypto land. But now there was the right question in the audience of what happens if the government comes in and decides that they don't like this anymore. Do we have a reason to believe that this will be any more resilient than the previously failed attempts? So as far as the sketchier coins, does Tether have a higher chance of surviving than, let's say, Liberty Reserve? Well, the answer is no. Or sort of, is Gemini Dollar any better than PayPal? Not really. Both of them are legitimate, and the blockchain is kind of a method of keeping the records, but it's not really adding anything in terms of the power balance between the users and the governments. And then the whole idea of crypto is that it's easier to encrypt than to decrypt. So the surprising outcome is citizens have sort of more of a leverage in negotiating with the governments as far as owning their money. So with that in mind, can we create a crypto-native stablecoin where the price tag would be somehow independent of the assets in the bank that are as easy for the government to seize as, I don't know, Liberty or coins? So this is going to be a little more technical. So I wanted to get a read of the room. How many people heard of MakerDAO? Oh, and how many would say that they have a rough idea of how that works in terms of where the collateral comes from, sort of why is the price stable and sort of within which bounds? All right, fantastic. Yeah, so the idea, again, dollars in the bank account can be seized by the government, so Liberty Reserve failed. Tether probably doesn't have any higher chances. Let's use native crypto as collateral. But the price is unstable, so we can't just take, I don't know, one Bitcoin, which is $6,000, and then issue 6,000 stable coins. That would not work. That would tie us to the price of crypto, which is back where we started. Now, what can we do to fix that? Then let's over collateralize. So, for example, if we take 5 Ether right now, and Ethereum is at roughly 200, so that would be $1,000 right now, and then we only issue 500 stable coins. And if you're familiar with ERC20, okay, so ERC20 is a way to issue your own token on the Ethereum platform. So it's kind of like for new magic internet money. All right, so let's say we over collateralize, we have more Ethereum than our obligations to stablecoin users. Now what that means is as long as Ethereum stays above 100, we have more Ethereum locked than stablecoins. So if, for example, again, if Ethereum goes down to 100, then we're at parity, and then if it's below 100, then then the peg breaks, and that's similar to to all the other situations we discussed with peg broke, be it Mexican peso or British pound or whatever. But as long as the price is high enough, the system is working. The nice part is the breakage condition is easy to analyze. There's a specific price at which the system breaks. And another good property of this design is that the fact breaking doesn't mean that everybody loses their money. With Tether, if the bank becomes insolvent, or if the government takes away the money in the bank, then essentially everybody is left with nothing. In the crypto collateralized case, what happens is as soon as there's price parity between the collateral and the stable coins, you do a margin call, and a margin call is essentially where you force a liquidation and a conversion. So whoever had, let's say, those 500 stable coins, they would get all of the five Ethereum that was in collateral, which would be worth 500 at the time of the conversion. So it's you didn't get cheated out of your money, you just got converted from 500 stable US dollars into 500 of Ethereum at that time, and now you're riding the Ethereum roller coaster with everybody. And the first attempt that was BitShares, which was invented by Dan Larimer in 2014. Now he's building EOS, and within BitShares they came up with their own assets instead of using a larger, more well-known cryptocurrency, which contributed to the system failure.
So in the event that the price falls, who lost the money? Like the issuer or?
So actually, nobody loses the money if the price goes down to 100. The person who had 500 stable coins, they get 5 ethers, which is worth $500. So you don't lose money, you just get a stable asset converted into an unstable one. And then
the investor, the stable.
Yeah, the holder of the stable coin doesn't lose money, it's the
issuer, right?
yeah, whoever puts collateral in, they lost money.
yeah. But like whoever put the collateral, they lost money on the price going down, and then they sort of lost the rest of it. And then if let's say Ethereum keeps dropping and then it drops to $50, then the owner of a stable coin loses half of their collateral as well, because now they're sort of exposed to the Ethereum price.
Yeah, do you know if MakerDAO or any issuer in general for this is doing something with the value that they have over the stablecoin like breaking?
Could you clarify as far as the?
Yeah, I mean, you could rent out the rest of the money for interest or trade it in some way. So if there's additional value that you have your collateral over, but it's back in your stablecoin, you can do other stuff with it. I'm wondering if that's taken out of that.
That could work, but it has its own problems. So in MakerDAO, people who put their collateral are actually paying interest for the leverage they get. More generally, if you lend out the collateral in a way that could end up in the collateral being lost, then you make the system less stable, right? So if you have, in this specific example, let's say we have 5 ethers, and then not only did you issue stable coins that, but you also lent those for somebody to, I don't know, like trade CryptoKitties. Well, if they lost money trading CryptoKitties, now your system is becoming less stable. So there's very few use cases where you can lend Ethereum in a way that you can be completely certain that the money will be returned to you. And those are the only ways in which you can lend this. Otherwise, you're sort of combining the price risk with the lender risk. And ideally, for a decentralized system, you would not want that. So yeah, we have MakerDAO, which is currently the best known example of those. And Andreessen Horowitz recently invested, I think 15 million was it in the previous deal, and then they recently bought up another large chunk of the supply. And then if you look at this price chart, this is the total circulation of the stablecoin. So if you look closely, the market cap grows steadily, and then there are sudden large drops. Anybody can explain why that would be the case?
instance? You're setting aside for investors.
What's that?
You're setting aside for.
Not exactly.
Liquidations?
Precisely, yes. So anybody can issue the stable coins, and you just need to lock some more Ethereum into the collateral, and then the system lets you print more stable coins due to that lockage. But then, if somebody locked a bunch of Ethereum and the price keeps falling and falling and falling, eventually you need to liquidate that position. So these drops essentially mean that whomever was the least collateralized, whoever put the least Ethereum for the most stable coins, eventually the system deemed that specific position to unstable and then had to convert that. So what you get as a result is there's less stable coin and less Ethereum in collateral, but the safety ratio goes up.
So do you know how they solve the fungibility problem? Because basically you have two smart contracts with different levels of capitalization. The two coins that they issue are not equivalent. So how do they kind of prove that?
That's a very good question, and we'll talk about that in. Oh, yeah. So like this is essentially the place to talk about it. So there's several designs you can do for the crypto collateralized stablecoins, and I would want to see more of those being explored. But for now, the way MakerDAO does it is they have all of the debt positions backing all the stablecoins. So, for example, some of those essentially once you issued your stablecoin, it is no longer tied to a specific position that issued it. So let's say somebody put $1,000 worth of Ethereum, which is 5 Ethereum, issued 500 stablecoins. Somebody else put twice as much Ethereum, so 10 Ethereum, $2,000. And for some reason they decided to issue just $100 worth of stablecoin. So it's crazy over collateralization. They have like 2x leverage. One of them is somewhat unsafe, the other one is way safer. But once those two chunks of stablecoin are issued, those become equivalent. So you can trade one of them in and out, and both Ethereum positions back the whole total supply of the stablecoin. And that doesn't have to be that way. Some people are considering other options where.
Yeah, if that's the case, then why are there specific liquidations that are only using a small amount of DAI? Like why isn't it that there's a liquidation for all of DAI or none of that?
Right, so all of the debt positions are backing all of the stablecoin, but that doesn't mean all of the debt positions are the same. So in the case where you have, let's say, 5 debt positions, one of them is very safe, so you have like 20 times more Ethereum than the DAIs issued. Oh, I understand the question. So when you issue new stablecoins, they are all fungible, so they are all traded together, but you still remember how many stablecoins you issued. So if you put a certain amount of Ethereum on the blockchain, and then you issue a certain smaller amount of the stablecoin, you still, that debt position still keeps the record of how much stablecoin was issued against it. So as a result, your debt, actually let me whiteboard. So let's say you have, we'll continue with like the examples from the slide. So we have 5 ETH here, so that's $1,000. And we issued 500. I'll use the word DAI because DAI is the name for the MakerDAO stablecoin. It could be, it's kind of could be called the dollar coin, but for whatever reason they're calling it DAI, so let's stick with that. Let me even draw it somewhat differently. So we have 5 here, and then we remember that this issued 500 DAI. And let's say we have another position, which is 10 ETH. That's $2,000. And then we have $200 DAI issued by this guy. So this guy issued 500, this guy issued 200. Now the way the system works is you have 700 DAI total, and So you have one piece of collateral backing the stablecoin, another piece of collateral backing the stablecoin. Those are issued by the creators, and now they're trading freely on the open market. So anybody can buy and sell those stablecoins from the issuer. Now, let's say Ethereum price is going down. Now what starts happening is what used to be $1,000 ends up being 900, and then ends up being 800, and so on and so forth, until the system deems that the collateral here is a little too close. And then here the same thing happens, so it goes down, and goes down a little more, and goes down a little more, but there's still a ton of safety. So what the system does is, when it looks at this position, it decides, okay, this one is too unsafe. Let me liquidate this chunk, and so 500 DAI get taken out of the system and receive Ether, but the rest of it stays. So this position is safe, and as a result, if Ethereum price in this example is going down, you have this one liquidated first, this one liquidated second. So the chart, like the supply chart, would be like you. If there was a drop, this would be a 500 drop, because you liquidated the riskiest position, not all of them. Yep.
So it's specific coins that get liquidated, not pro rata amounts across
Correct.
all the major trades. So it's not really aggregated. Still, you don't get fungibility that way at all.
I think that what they do is they run an auction where an auction and a reverse auction where people essentially people give their DAI to be liquidated, so they sort of volunteer their DAI to be liquidated.
But essentially, specific collateral call and ultimately a liquidation call on specific coins. So let's say if I sold the token of those coins, I run a risk with some coins traded on with others, of ending up with some indeterminate amount of Ether. Is that correct?
So not exactly. Since people are bidding on their liquidations, I guess there is technically the risk that nobody ever would want to liquidate their DAI, and then you would have the situation that you described where everybody gets converted. But that situation aside, as long as there are market makers who are willing to take a profit, the system is safe. So when you do a liquidation here, you don't necessarily convert into $500 dollars worth of Ether. You convert into 510. So the guy who issued, or the person who issued this position gets a penalty for kind of being the least safe participant in the system, and whomever decided to burn their DAI gets more money than they're entitled to.
But if you go to 400, the situation changes. Like in terms of
If
value.
the collateral goes to 100?
Yeah.
Well, the reason, again, that's a good question. The reason that does not happen in the MakerDAO system is that so they have a safety ratio, which is, I believe 150% is the minimum. So what happens is, as soon as the value is $750, everybody is entitled to do a margin call. So nobody would wait until it falls to 400. People would rather come in early and make a profit by sort of force converting that person into money. Yep.
What's the role of MCAR token in a CDP liquidation?
What's that?
What's the role of MCAR token, basically governance DAO token, in the CDP liquidation? During the liquidation, you
Right.
do not just like ask people to get like DAI somewhat. Like you use an additional token MCAR in this.
Oh, that I'm not sure. I don't think that ever happened yet. But yeah, so for the rest of the audience, Maker also has the MKR token, which is kind of like the governance in the system, ownership, whatever token. And what that is used for is on the upside, when people are issuing new DAI, MKR accrues fees. So sort of some chunk of the fees and the interest rate goes to MKR holders. But if there's not enough money in the whole system to do a liquidation, then MKR token becomes kind of the lender of last resort, and those guys lose money on the conversion. Yes.
So the design that you described, does this put some kind of cap on the size of your DAI cap element relative to Ethereum?
Precisely.
Because the thing that you're describing, the price impact would actually be that, the more that falls, price of the DAI should probably increase in some sense, right? Because you have a shift in capital from Ethereum kind of like buying up the DAI, and you should expect like a jump down in Ethereum price as well.
So I think there's a couple questions here. The easier one is there a limit on the DAI market cap? The answer is yes, of course. You cannot have more DAI than, let's say, half of all Ethereum market cap to be over collateralized. So that part I agree with. And then as far as the DAI price going up, how would that work?
I'm just so like, I'm from a more finance background, so I'm kind of thinking of like the microstructure, what happens when the price is starting to fall. So I'm trying to figure out like if people are rushing to convert or something, like should I like understand that as like a negative demand shock for Ethereum and cause it to die, and then try to pull that circulation.
So that's
Well,
that's somewhat complex to analyze because as Ethereum is going down, I would agree that initially you would, and on the one hand, that means that people want to get out of Ethereum and into dollars, and that kind of by definition means that okay, people want DAI as one of the possible ways to represent the dollar, but that also means that DAI now starts becoming more and more risky, right? If you had sort of the total of collateral against the total of issuance, if the total of collateral is going down, then your stability guarantees are sort of worse and worse.
Is it possible to use multiple different assets to back DAI and create a more Bitcoin?
That's a very interesting question. There's kind of there's two parts to the answer. One is organizational, and another one is technical. Organizationally, the question is which assets do you want to use? I think MakerDAO, as it is moving towards the multi-collateral DAI, and specifically they wanted to start backing by real-world assets. So instead of just using Ethereum, they want to use, for example, even the Gemini dollar, which is pretty stable, or the Digix, the sort of the gold coin. I believe Digix is the first in line after Ethereum to be added. And that one I'm not as excited about because that kind of makes the system, that sort of puts us back to fiat land where the system is exposed to government decisions, where if you have this like supposedly decentralized system, but half the collateral is in the bank account, then government seizing it will essentially lead to the whole system collapsing. And that is as far as backing by real world assets. And then the other question is, can you back those by other cryptocurrencies, and specifically crypto native assets that cannot be seized by the government? That's a lot more interesting, and that's a good idea. The problem here is that all of the native cryptocurrencies are strongly correlated. So if you back by Bitcoin, Ethereum, I don't know, Zcash, you barely get any better than just backing by Ethereum, and sort of that's the nature of the dilemma there. And then finally, Bitcoin would probably be the only asset that's better than Ethereum to collateralize the stablecoin with, but it's actually technically pretty complex. That requires interoperability, where you need to sort of be able to lock Bitcoins trustlessly in a smart contract and then issue stablecoins against that. We'll actually talk about that in a little bit as far as specifically why that matters. So let me get to the next slide and then I'll.
So maybe then competitor out and do a equivalent version of DAI on the Lightning Network.
Yeah, so the important part in the, I'm not sure if that part was clear, but the important part in the crypto collateralized is that we don't just hold Ethereum in the bank account or in some person's wallet, I don't know, like the MakerDAO's CEO. The important part is it's all held in a smart contract that's mediated by the system, so these ethers cannot be taken away by any government or any single actor. Their behavior is predictable through the smart contract. And then Bitcoin doesn't have smart contracts, so locking it is a lot harder. The problem with Lightning is you can transfer Bitcoins back and forth between people, but you don't have full interoperability. So you can't issue a Bitcoin token on the Ethereum network and essentially transfer those back and forth. So long story short, there's There's a bit more complexity to backing stablecoins by Bitcoin, but it's doable if the Bitcoin community is willing to somewhat amend the consensus.
So, as I listen to this, right, there's nothing new or interesting here except you sort of, you know, put some electrons around stuff and sort of electrify it. I mean, if you take a use case and say, if we had the credit project in 2008 in the US market, right, Lehman Brothers, letters of credits and bonds became worthless, right? They dropped 70–80% very quickly. And they were backed by buildings or some other assets, and those dropped, or mortgages or whatever it is, right? And what you saw was that as stable as people thought their collateral was, it wasn't stable. And the only people that were able to fix that was the Fed, right? No one else could fix, and Lehman went out of business, right? And in today's world, we've got a lot of assets, right? We've got bankers' notes where banks are borrowing every night from other banks that have excess reserves and so forth. And but those transactions are again, they function independently, but if they go awry, there is a power that steps in and stabilizes the market. And as stable, the word has stable coin in it. But I'm just saying, okay, let's take a use case and say the markets are doing what they did in 2008. Would this system actually survive?
So this was fairly long, so let me try and sort of tackle different pieces one by one. As far as what's novel and interesting here, that is not the idea to back your stablecoins by crypto. So the novelty piece is not that there used to be debt obligations backed by buildings, and now all of a sudden we have debt obligations backed by Ethereum, which somehow is any better. It's not. The novel piece is the fact that we have smart contracts, and the contract itself is locked into the consensus system. So we're kind of using a bunch of cryptography to make it harder to breach contract here. In case of buildings and debt obligations, and other than the risk of buildings becoming worthless, there was also the risk that whoever owns buildings refuses to honor the debt obligations. With crypto, if you can use smart contracts, at least the risk of converting Ether into DAI or like into dollars, whatever, that risk is no longer present. So that's the interesting piece. And as far as the stability, I agree that obviously it's not a perfect guarantee, and the nice part is that the bonds are very easy to analyze. You know that, okay, like we issued the thing at Ethereum at 200, at 100, the system collapses. But we're not sort of the design here is not promising stability, so it's more of a stable-ish coin.
Another video point would be like the price discovery. In the extreme case, you may not be able to send the price signal to the USD to bank, so that I don't know.
Yeah, good point. I agree. That's sort of right now. That's the one point of centralization in the system, and I agree that it's a risk. There's a bunch of proposals to try and tackle it. That at least for now, that there is a risk and sort of a centralization for sure.
But you had smart contracts in 2008, right? AIG basically guaranteed the CDOs, right? And those CDOs could, that smart contract fell apart. And the only reason those CDOs were actually somewhat whole is that the Fed stepped in and said, we'll guarantee for AIG to provide liquidity. And my big question is, take the use case. All this is fantastic, right? And I'm being, for a technology person, I'm being a little bit questioning in terms of, would a system like this, even with smart contracts, because smart contracts still means you have the ability to honor that contract. And that means how deep is your pocket, right?
So I'll push back on AEG being a smart contract. I believe that is a regular legal contract that is enforced through courts. Smart contracts are enforced through participation, which some people claim is more decentralized or somewhat harder to break single-handedly.
Let me take a shot at answering this. So I think to some degree you're right. If a crash happens fast enough, right? If you just have like a negative infinity slope where all of a sudden Ethereum goes to zero, clearly DAI isn't going to save your ass, right? Like all the assets are going to zero and there's no coming back from that.
That's my point.
Yeah, and that's correct. That's correct. But that slope has to be really fucking steep, right? And I think some of the promise of DAI relative to systems that are mediated in meat space is that all this stuff happens really, really fast, right? So you don't need to call lawyers on the phone. You don't need to have human organizations coordinating with each other. Like all of these auctions happen automatically in the blockchain, and this is really good because it's mediated entirely by game theory, right? Basically, look, we are doing a fire sale, right? If you assume that people still want to make money, then you are going to be able to sell the DAI and collateralize the remaining system such that it's sufficiently safe. Now, no promises how quickly that drawdown happens if you have a massive cut.
With a
Right?
10 or 15% drop.
Exactly, but we've seen over this year, we've seen Ethereum drop by 75%, right? Massive drawdown. And DAI has remained stable, right? Because the system has worked. Now, that, in the early stages where the system was relatively small, so you saw in the previous slide, the issuance of DAI is, capped out at about 50 million or something like that. So it's not a massive system relative to Tether. Tether's in the billions, right? And some of the, many of the early adopters of DAI might be kind of irrationally exuberant about it and be willing to recollateralize their positions to keep the issuance of DAI up. That, I think all of that is totally correct as criticism of the system. But ultimately, even in this year, when Ethereum just got beaten to hell, it didn't happen so fast that the system could not deal with it. So the primary threat would be, let's say, for example, every exchange got simultaneously shut down with it, right? That would probably be such a catastrophic event for the price of Ether that maybe DAI would not be able to withstand that, and there would have to be some kind of global settlement.
But it doesn't have to happen very often, once every 20 or 25 years, right?
Yes.
It's a black swan issue.
Absolutely. Yeah, and in that case, DAI would break.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this and saying, okay, another practical application is hedging, right? I'm an auto manufacturer and I have to buy platinum someplace else, but I want to hedge that because I know how many cars I'm going to build this year, and but then I've got to pay salaries someplace else. So I've got currency hedge, plus I've got commodity hedge, and I've got labor hedge, and all of that, right? And that's a huge problem right now in terms of an application. And the smart contracts will help you with that, do some of that, but I'm not sure a human being can actually understand, what their positions are and how they're doing this, right?
Yeah, I'd say if there's one principal weakness of, there are several for MakerDAO, but I think it's definitely complexity. Like obviously, thus far spent the most time talking about this one because it's really complicated.
Although we didn't tackle the growth phase yet.
That's right.
So the concerns this gentleman is raising right now, these are concerns that we've talked about for a while, the exact same scenario with stablecoins. The one question I have for you guys is, do you think there's a possibility that the answer for quote unquote stable-ish coin or stable coins are possible to have is it's just too early in crypto? And the answer for crypto ends up having the strongest network generated money over time. Maybe that takes a decade, maybe it takes 2 decades. That's when we actually have price swing. In the meantime, any effort to force stability is going to be exposed to some black swan risk and potentially lose trust, make people lose trust.
Let me, if it's okay with you, let me punt on that until after the presentation, because I think that's sort of more of a general question about stablecoins and crypto. So let's just try to move on, just so that we don't end up having people for longer than an hour for this point.
So back to crypto collateralized, we have it can fail, but we can pretty easily analyze the conditions and why that would fail and when that would or would happen. Then the benefit is that it's very transparent. All the collateral you have in the system, that's on chain. Everybody can verify that if you have, in this example, 15 ethers, then that's 15 ether on the blockchain. Everybody can see that it's there. It hasn't been lended out to support some other layer of complexity on top of the stablecoin. So that's nice. And then the problem with the design is And there's been a few questions from the audience as far as like what's the total market cap limit and like what's the capital efficiency. Well, the obvious problem here is the more stability you want, the less capital efficient it is. So if you want stability to Ethereum crashing 5x, then you need 5x as much Ethereum as dollars and so forth. Is that a quick one or?
I believe so. I believe a lot of people will have a question, what's the incentive to put Ether in the collateral? But regardless of that, what's the correlation between creation of a DAI and the demand for a DAI? Looks like you have a sort of incentive to put your Ether into CDP and create some DAI, and this demand for creating a CDP are not necessarily correlated with demand for stablecoin DAI.
That is an excellent question, and that's precisely the problem MakerDAO is trying to tackle right now. I'll just give a brief answer to continue, and then we'll maybe expand at the end. Yeah, so the question was, the demand for lending Ether is not necessarily tied to the demand of using the stablecoin. So what if a ton of people want to use the stablecoin? There's like $1 billion worth of demand for a stablecoin, same as Tether, but nobody cares to lend their Ether. What do you do then? And conversely, what if everybody wants to lend their Ether and earn a little bit of interest rate, but nobody uses the stablecoin? Both are good questions, and essentially you just need to look at where the market is and pay the interest rate accordingly. Personally, I would think that a lot of people need the stablecoin, so you would have to pay Ether lenders for issuance of the stablecoin. Turns out the MakerDAO team looked into that and reached the opposite result. It turns out there's not as much demand for DAI, and there's a lot of demand for leverage. So a lot of people want to lend their Ether, issue stablecoins, sell stablecoins for Ether, lend some more, and essentially over leverage their position into Ether. And as a result of that, what you have to do is you have to pay the stablecoin users from the lenders, not vice versa. But either way, those interest rates need to be adjusted to sort of work with the market. All right, so let's get over the final category of the stablecoins, which is growth collateralized. This is probably the most complex to tackle, and there's plenty of different designs. So just as a quick read, anybody here has sort of basis or base coin, treasury coin? So the idea here is that instead of using Ethereum, we actually use instead of using crypto as collateral, we use the future promise for the utility of the system as collateral. So we expect that stablecoin usage increases over time, and more people need stablecoins. So let's say right now, crypto is a small chunk of society. People don't need as much of it. Let's say a year from now, people want double as much stablecoin as they want now, and then 2 years from now, they want triple as much stablecoins as they want now. And empirically, that's a reasonable prediction. Tether has been growing in market cap pretty much exponentially, so it seems like people do want stablecoins. Now, what that means in practice is we separate the people, the risk takers, so those who have an appetite to take risks and make money, from the stability consumers, and those are the people who use the stablecoin. The risk takers would be underwriting the issuance. So essentially, whenever you issue more stablecoins, they accrue in value to the risk takers, and they reap the profits. On the other hand, if there's a short-term price crash, it's the risk takers that lose money. That model was originally called series shares and was invented by Robert Sams in 2014. So yeah, this is a little non-trivial to wrap your head around. Let me go over a couple steps of how the system works and sort of describe the decision tree for the system. First off, again, we have two assets. The risk taker asset, which we would call shares, because it's kind of like share ownership in the system, versus the stablecoin, which should be at $1. Now, since the goal of the system is to keep the stablecoin at $1, you can only have two problems. It's priced above $1 and it's priced below $1. There's no other problems for you to handle. Now, if it's above $1, that's an easy problem to have. You just print more stablecoins. So if your thing trades at I don't know $1.10, just print as much of it as you need and sell it until the price goes back down to $1. That's pretty simple. And then the question is, okay, but who gets to print those? Who gets to profit off of selling those? Well, the shareholders do. So the risk takers who are underwriting the system are printing new coins, distributed pro rata, and then sell those on the open market. Now that's easy, but the relative problem is harder. What if the price is too low? What if your stablecoin trades at 90 cents? So there's more supply of the stablecoin than there is demand for it. How do you solve that? Well, clearly you need to reduce the circulation. You need to have less stablecoin in total supply. Well, the only way to do this is to somehow take those off the market and somehow burn those. And the way you do this is you run an auction, somewhat similar to MakerDAO, except now you burn the coin in return for future shares. So, for example, if right now the price is 90 cents, what you're saying is, okay, who wants to be added to the pool of risk takers? Now you have some stable coins. Do you want to instead be converted into a risk taker, have new shares issued to you, and then in return for that, as if the system goes back up, you'd be the one to profit. And obviously the person is selling their tokens doesn't have to be the risk taker themselves. They can just sell those obligations back and forth in the open market. But that's the general idea.
So that's basically a derivative.
Yeah, precisely, yeah. And we've discussed the stability bands in terms of the stablecoin being a random walk, and at some point the stablecoin hits a boundary condition and the price collapses, but if it doesn't, then it works out. So in this case, let's assume that the demand for stablecoin is a random walk, and if and only if the demand is growing, so then the bias for this random walk is positive. That means eventually you'll reach infinitely high demand, or like not infinitely high, but sort of the demand will be higher than any previous number. Let's say you had demand for $1 billion worth of stablecoin, then that fell to $500 million. If the expectation over time is positive, eventually you would hit 2 billion, 4 billion, 10 billion, whatever. So presumably it pays to be a shareholder, and that means if the demand takes a temporary hit, it's good for you at some price boundary to be converted into shares. And this is the idea behind Basis, a growth-based stablecoin started by a few guys out of Google New York, and they recently raised 133 million, which made fairly big news because they're all sort of 25-year-olds, and the company existed for less than a year. So clearly a lot of people do want to see this experiment go on. And now there would be a reasonable question to ask of, okay, is this a financial pyramid? Does this sound too good to be true? Can this financial professional motion device ever work? Well, maybe it can, maybe it can't. Who knows? People like to use the word pyramid to impose a moral judgment and say that, okay, it's a bad thing, it's somebody's trying to screw somebody else. But in reality, we have a lot of sort of growth collateralized system in our society. The best example would be Social Security. You get old, you get paid on the hope that the future generation works hard and sort of pays enough taxes to sort of pay you back, and then when you're younger, you are the one paying taxes and sort of buying out the previous pyramid participants in the hopes that the next ones would buy out you. And yeah, if you look at the total amount of money supply, it grew steadily over time. So the assumption that over time the growth rate is positive and the demand is positive is a fairly reasonable one. So it sounds like it could work out. And then, unlike the previous two designs, this one is a pretty awesome investment if you get to be early on in this sort of exponential growth. In fiat-backed stablecoins, you don't necessarily make anything except a tiny interest rate on the dollar pool. In crypto collateralized, the interest rate may be higher, and then in this system, all of the future money supply accrues to the shareholders. So in the sort of shiny skies, best case example, the demand never goes down. People just need more and more and more and more and more of the stablecoin. And what that means is all of the stablecoins are originally printed by the